Hello everyone, I am Clemencia Marçal. So now I'm with the president of UNICEF, Patrizia, and this is my friend.
Hi everyone.
So now we're really excited to learn more about the children's rights, about the climate change, and the other topics that we're going to talk about. And we're looking forward to share our experience and knowledge as the children.
Patrizia, can you please tell us about where do you grow up and when you as a child you faced the problem about the pollution and climate change?
Thanks so much for that, and thank you for starting not so hard. So I grew up in one of the suburbs of Sydney in Australia, in a very working class area. And I've got to say, when I was growing up, we didn't really have that language about climate change. So I think the main issue for us was, we talk about it in Timor-Leste as well, about the pollution in terms of picking up trash. We had lots of programs about that. And we talked a lot about that kind of stuff with pollution, with our rivers, with our oceans. But we really didn't talk about the big picture of climate change when I was younger. We just talked about these little things because we're already aware of those things in those days.
Why do climate change such an important discussion these days?
Yeah. I think that the science is showing us that so much of the climate is changing, and sometimes not for very good purposes. I think in this country we see that there are more floods because of deforestation. There's not a lot of water around in the internal, even if we're surrounded by water because we're an island. The seawater is not about drinking and using it for the house. So I think it's really important in the world because of what children, not just the children like you guys, but all the ones that are not born yet, what they're going to inherit in the world that's going to be hotter. I think some of the island states, we're talking about some of them might disappear, or that, Timor-Leste, the water would go up and then we might have less of Timor-Leste. So I think that these are really important issues and why we talk a lot about it. But I also can't help but say that as adults, we've had lots of discussions about climate change, but it wasn't until young people themselves a few years ago started to really activate this topic. And it really is a topic that young people have embraced. There have been protests all over the world, and they really care about the planet. So I think if young people are caring about the planet, then I should also care about what young people care about, right?
Yes.
What are some of things that UNICEF is work with the government to protect child and their families from likely impact of climate change?
So UNICEF is working with the government. We're looking at what is the impact of climate change on Timor-Leste, but also how can we proceed in the future to make sure that the country is not contributing to climate change. So at the moment, the country is really experiencing a lot of the problems without actually having like the big industry or contributing to the world like negatively. So it's important that we keep it that way, number one, so that our, what they call the footprint, remains as zero as possible. And so we're working with the government on how we can do that. What does that mean? How can we have more climate sensitive schools so we're not contributing to the climate problem? We have not just solar power, but how can we have more efficient power without causing problems? How do we find water in the ground without contributing to degradation or making the environment worse? And in education, we're also hoping that we can introduce some curriculum so young people can learn. But also in all of the ministries that the government has that helps children, how can we make sure that the climate footprint is at a minimum so that the government here and the country is not contributing to the problem, but rather contributing to the solution? I think that's such a nice opportunity for the country, that for once we are contributing to a solution instead of being part of the problem, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why is it also important for the children to also taking care of our planet or our environment?
That's a good question, isn't it? That's a really good question. I think as we're trying to change behaviours, it's important that we start at the very youngest. And as I said before, I think children across the world are really showing that they care about the environment. So they're also the ones that are willing to make a change in their behaviour, learn about good habits, right? You were saying earlier about picking up your garbage and not burning it because then you have that pollution, and, you know, making sure that our rivers and our seas are not full of litter. And so I think that impacting on young people, it's harder to convince us old people to change our ways, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. But I think also sometimes I can see that parents love their children so much that if the children come home and say, Mama, Papa, we should not do this, that they can influence. And if you go on a picnic with your mum and dad and you say, no, let's take not a plastic garbage, let's collect all the garbage, then you can really influence your mamas and papas and your aunties and uncles and grandparents. So I think there's a power with young people which is still not very understood, that I can feel, and I hope that we can contribute as UNICEF to empower young people, not just to change themselves in good habits, but to influence everyone around them.
Okay, for the last question is, we want to know your opinion about what can the children like us can do to make sure that our planet or our world stays safe and beautiful for the future.
I think you're already almost there. So I can see that you're very active young people, you're vocal, you have an opinion, you're not afraid to share it, and I love that you do it respectfully and honestly, because I think that's important. I think educate yourselves on what is the best way to move forward. I think what's important in a real struggle, which I didn't have when I was a kid, was try and find out what's fake news and what's real news, and then follow the real news, because I think there's lots out there and the technology is moving and the science is moving so quickly. So stay informed, find out what other young people are doing, get other young people who are passionate like you together and form groups that will clean up the beach, influence your parents respectfully, as I'm sure you do, and all those things. And I think that later on when you get older, and especially as you become parents yourselves, give young children a chance to speak as well. When you become the boss in the office, make sure that you have garbage bins and that the staff are acting properly. If you get into politics, make sure that you remember when you were a child. So whatever you do in the future, you bring this with you and make sure that you continue to be the activists that you are today.
Thank you, Patrizia. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the beautiful answers that you have given to the young people, to children like us, and goodbye, everyone.
And thank you for your time. Thank you
too.
for all the work that you do and the advocacy, and for spending time with me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you too, Nana.